Okay, let's dive into something that, well, it seems full of contradictions on the surface.
Definitely. We're exploring astrology today, looking at some really fascinating material, articles, research, notes you've gathered.
And right off the bat, this material gives us this striking anecdote.
Yeah, the most famous astrologer in Hong Kong, this guy nicknamed the Ghost King,
Uh,
he's actually quoted saying, "I am not superstitious at all."
right. I mean, the guy making a fortune from astrological readings says he's not superstitious. Oh, that's something.
And you mentioned fortune. The material points out that top astrologers in Hong Kong can apparently earn more than investment bankers. Seriously.
Wow. Okay, so that tells you something important.
Exactly. This isn't just some, fringe belief. It's
Right.
widespread, it's clearly profitable, and it just sticks around.
Absolutely. So our mission here in this deep dive is to take all this information, this material, and really pull out the key insights. We want to understand why people believe in astrology.
We'll look at the scientific challenges, of course.
Yes, definitely. But just as importantly, we need to explore the psychological reasons that seem to keep this belief system going so strong.
And the material lays out some, frankly, surprising facts and angles for us to unpack together.
Okay, let's start with just how common this belief actually is. The material brings in some U.S. context, right? Referencing people like John Allen Paulos and Carl Sagan.
It does, and it points to some pretty interesting data. Like a Gallup poll mentioned, it found 52% of U.S. teenagers believe in astrology.
52%,
Huh.
more than half. And the material suggests many stick with that belief throughout their lives.
And it gets even more, well, maybe startling when you look at high-profile examples. The material really digs into President Reagan's reliance on his astrologer.
Oh yeah, Joan Quigley, that's well documented.
The material details how she apparently had a direct line, to the White House and influenced the president's schedule.
Imagine that, a direct line. And the material even gives a sample schedule entry from March '85.
Yes, it does. It shows dates marked show, meaning inauspicious, March 7th through 14th. Then March 10th to 14th. We, not suitable for going out.
So stay inside.
Vaporly. Then March 16th, very inauspicious.
Ooh, a bad one.
And March 19th through 25th. We not suitable for public appearances.
Wow. Just stay out of sight for a whole week.
Yeah, the reaction in the source material seeing that schedule is pretty amusing.
I bet. It jokes about picturing the president as an e-dove, basically a homebody, right? Having to stay indoors.
Exactly. And it makes this funny point, wondering if someone like Quigley would even be needed in China.
Because?
Because their traditional almanacs, they eat already suitable and unsuitable activities for every single day anyway.
Ah, that's a good point. Okay, so these examples, from teenagers to the White House, they really set the stage.
They do. They lead us straight to the core question the material keeps coming back to. What about the actual validity of these astrological claims?
Right. Does the position of planets at birth really determine your personality, your fate? The material offers some pretty sharp scientific challenges.
And one of the most, I think, elegant ones comes from John Allen Paulos.
Oh, this is the physics one, right? It's so clever.
It really is. Paulos tackles that idea that planetary gravity influences personality at birth.
Okay.
He points out, basic physics, gravity depends on mass, yes, but it drops off with the square of the distance.
Which means things that are far away have much, much less pull.
Precisely. Planets are huge, massive, but they are incredibly far away. Now, who is right there, extremely close to the baby at birth?
The doctor or midwife.
Exactly, the doctor delivering the baby. And Paulos argues that the doctor, despite being tiny compared to a planet, exerts significantly more gravitational force on that newborn.
Because they're just inches away, not millions of miles.
Right, which leads to his fantastic punchline.
Which is?
Well, if gravity at birth dictates personality, then logically, personality differences should depend more on whether the delivery doctor was a fat doctor or a thin doctor.
Huh. That's brilliant. And the material calls that maybe the smartest attack on astrology it found, just using physics against the premise itself.
It's very neat. The material also brings up empirical tests, like Richard Wiseman's experiments from his book, Quirkology.
Yes, the luck experiments. These are really insightful. Tell us about the first one.
Okay, so Wiseman surveyed around 40,000 people. This was in the Northern Hemisphere. He asked them about how lucky they felt, generally.
And then compared it to their birth month.
Exactly. And he found a pattern. People born between March and August, the summer months up north, tended to report feeling luckier.
Luckier than winter babies.
Yes, luckier than those born September through February. The material notes May birthdays reported feeling the luckiest, and October the unluckiest.
Okay. And the material says some astrologers felt vindicated by this.
Initially, yeah, they were like, see, birth month matters. It correlates with luck.
But Wiseman spotted something crucial.
He did. That data was only from the northern hemisphere. If the astrological sign for, say, May truly made you lucky, it should work everywhere, right? Regardless of where you live.
Which led him to do the follow-up experiment.
Down in New Zealand? Southern hemisphere.
And this is where the material says there was a big reversal.
Total reversal. In the southern hemisphere, people born March through August, which is their winter, reported feeling less lucky.
And the summer babies down there, September to February?
They reported feeling more lucky. The whole pattern flipped perfectly with the seasons.
So it wasn't about the astrological sign of the month at all.
It strongly suggests not. The correlation was with the season of birth. The material concludes the influencing factor is likely environmental, tied to season or temperature.
Like what?
Well, maybe things like how much time winter babies spend indoors initially, or perhaps even differences in what mothers eat seasonally during pregnancy. Things like that.
Huh. Interesting. And the material notes astrologers weren't too pleased with Wiseman after that finding.
You can imagine. But, okay, there's another really powerful test the material discusses. Shawn Carlson's 1985 experiment. This one tested astrologers directly.
Right. Carlson was a physicist. How did he set this up?
He got 28 pretty well-respected astrologers involved from the U.S. and Europe. Top people in the field, according to the source.
Okay. And the test?
He gave them the astrological data, birth date, time, location for 116 different people, subjects in the study.
The standard birth chart info.
Exactly. Then, for each subject, he provided 3 different personality profiles. One was the actual profile of that subject, based on a standardized psychological test, the California Personality Index. The other 2 were fake, decoys.
In the astrologer's job.
Use the birth chart data to pick the one correct personality profile out of the 3 for each subject. Match the chart to the person.
Okay, a direct test of their claimed ability. What happened?
Well, out of 116 attempts to match the chart to the correct profile, the astrologers got it right 40 times.
40 times. Out of 116, what does that mean statistically?
Well, think about it. If you're just guessing randomly between 3 choices, how often would you expect to be right?
About 1/3 of the time.
Exactly. And 1/3 of 116 is, what, around 38 or 39?
So 40 correct answers. That's basically just random chance.
That's precisely the conclusion the material highlights. It uses this phrase, astrologers completely defeated.
Well,
Even top professionals under these controlled conditions did no better than guessing.
so okay. We've got these arguments, basic physics, these empirical studies on luck, direct tests of astrologers, all pointing away from astrology having predictive power.
Right.
And yet, and this is the big question the material raises, why do so many people continue to believe so strongly?
This is where it shifts into the psychology, which honestly I find the most fascinating part of the material.
Me too. The first big explanation offered is the Barnum effect, right? Or the Forer effect.
Yes. Named after Bertram Forer. He did this classic experiment back in 1948, described in the source. He gave his psychology students what he told them was a personalized personality analysis based on a test they'd taken.
But it wasn't really personalized, was it?
Not at all. He gave every single student the exact same description.
And the material quotes parts of that description. Let me read some. You need others' appreciation? You are critical of yourself. Okay, you have weaknesses, but always find ways to compensate.
It also included lines like, you pride yourself as an independent thinker, and at times you are extroverted, affable, sociable, while other times you are introverted, wary, reserved.
Oh, covering both bases there.
Totally. And things like you have unused potential, and at times you have serious doubts about your decisions.
Okay, let me just pause there. For you listening right now, take a second.
Yeah.
Does that description feel like it could be talking about you?
Because that's exactly the reaction Forer got from his students. An overwhelming 87% rated that generic description as Achan, unbelievably accurate. They gave it really high scores for accuracy.
But the kicker, as the material explains, is that description wasn't just generic. It was literally a hodgepodge that Forer had just cobbled together from various astrology columns he found in a newsstand.
Right. So the Barnum effect is basically this. We tend to accept vague, general statements, especially if they're mostly positive, as being highly accurate and specifically about us. Astrology often works this way. The descriptions are broad enough to fit almost anyone, but they feel personal.
Okay, that makes sense. Then the material brings up another psychological angle, the kapha, the flattery effect.
Yeah, this one's pretty straightforward. The core idea is simply that people tend to believe things that make them look good. Things that, as the material puts it, make themselves appear great, glorious, and correct. We like flattery.
And there was an experiment mentioned that tested this with astrology by Margaret Hamilton.
Yes. It looked at whether people accepted astrology differently based on their zodiac sign type specifically, whether they had a yang sign or a yin sign.
Okay, explain that division.
Traditionally, the 12 signs are split. Yang or positive signs are Aries, Gemini, Leo, Libra, Sagittarius, Aquarius. Yin or negative signs are the other 6.
And the key difference in their descriptions.
Well, the material points out that the traditional personality descriptions for yang signs often emphasize traits like being extroverted, proactive, dynamic,
Yeah.
generally using more, well, flattering language.
Whereas yin side descriptions might focus more on introversion, caution, maybe presented in a less overtly positive way.
Sometimes, yes, and Hamilton's study found that people whose birth sign was one of the yang signs reported a significantly higher belief in astrology compared to people with yin signs.
Ah, okay. So that ties right back to the flattery effect.
It suggests it does. The thinking is, if your sign's description sounds more positive and flattering, you're more likely to buy into the whole system. The material kind of speculates, maybe the more positive or even outrageous the praise, the more we might actually believe it.
It's interesting how these psychological effects seem to operate, and you can see them playing out, like the material mentions, in how astrology remains popular, even in places like China on social media.
Oh yeah, the examples given are things like viral Weibo topics. You'll see posts like, "Eat, Capricorns make the most money this month."
Or Skyoma.
The girls who are best at housework are Aries. Or even opposition Sagittarius, the sign with the strongest sex drive.
Right. And people share these.
They get shared widely, and the material suggests it's not because people have rigorously checked if Capricorns really did make the most money that month.
It's more because it feels resonant, or it's flattering, or just entertaining.
Exactly. It taps into that Barnum effect. Oh, that sounds like me. Or the flattery effect. Yes, Aries are great housekeepers. Or maybe just the fun of it.
Okay, so let's just recap where this deep dive into the material has taken us. We started with the surprising prevalence of belief, even at really high levels, like the Reagan White House example.
Then we move through the scientific challenges, Paulos's gravity argument, Wiseman's luck studies showing a seasonal effect, not an astrological one, and Carlson's direct test, where astrologers performed no better than chance.
And finally, we landed on these powerful psychological explanations. The Barnum effect, making vague statements feel personal, and the flattery effect, making us susceptible to positive descriptions.
Right. These effects help explain why belief can be so persistent, so sticky, even when the sort of empirical evidence we looked at doesn't really seem to support the claims.
The material really gives us these frameworks, doesn't it? For understanding the appeal of astrology, looking beyond just true or false to the why of belief.
It highlights these, cognitive biases or tendencies that make us prone to accepting certain kinds of information about ourselves.
And for you, listening, hopefully exploring this material gives you some interesting tools. Ways to think about why certain ideas take hold, how we process information about ourselves, especially information that feels very direct and personal.
It really does leave us with the final thought to maybe mull over, building on these themes from the material belief, evidence, self-perception. Perhaps that very deep, very human desire we have to understand ourselves, our strengths, weaknesses, maybe even get a hint of the future. Perhaps that desire makes us uniquely receptive.
Receptive to what?
Receptive to explanations that feel appealing, that feel personalized, even if they lack strong empirical backing like astrology often does. So the question becomes, how does understanding our own biases, like this tendency to believe vague flattery, maybe help us?
Help us navigate all the information out there.
Exactly. How does it help us sort through everything we encounter daily? Trying to figure out what's genuinely accurate about ourselves and the world around us, something to think about.